Fuel is especially scarce in Sri Lanka with very limited transport options for residents. Could the situation in the South Asian neighbor impact the Philippine economy? Joining us now is the former Sri Lankan Central Bank Governor, Arjuna Mahenderan, joining us from Singapore. Arjuna, thank you so much for joining us. There are close to 600 Filipinos who live and work in Sri Lanka, and many of them are having difficulty buying fuel and other essential goods. What led to this collapse in the Sri Lankan economy?
Hi, Rico. Thank you for having me. Basically, Sri Lanka, from about 2019, pre-COVID, had its own domestic problems. Some of them very unfortunate. You may recall that on Easter Day in 2019, there was a bombing of several Catholic churches by Islamic militants, and that caused a big setback to the tourism sector. Thereafter, there was an election, and the new government that came in cut taxes very abruptly, which created this inflationary pressure because most of the government spending had to be funded by the printing of new money. And finally, there was a change in agricultural policy regarding the imports of fertilizer, where there was a switch from chemical fertilizers to organic. And that deeply affected agriculture, particularly the plantations, which export tea and other products. So all that predated COVID. So once COVID struck Sri Lanka, the economy was already faltering. And this is why Sri Lanka has been affected much earlier than other countries.
So it's been a confluence of factors since 2019. And this economic crisis, Arjuna, is a harsh reality for a country whose economy had been growing quickly with a growing and comfortable middle class until this latest crisis deepened. How can this economy be fixed then?
Well, some of those policies that I referred to earlier probably have to be reversed. There has to be an increase back to the previous taxation rates so that the government budget and the money printing don't get completely out of control, which they have already. But in addition to that, agricultural practices have to perhaps revert, and there has to be more time given for any drastic changes in fertilizer policy, etc. So it's going to be a gradual process, and the IMF is in talks with the government of Sri Lanka to see how this change can be effected.
But of course, when you borrow money from international lenders, when you borrow money from your neighbors like India, I mean, they will, of course, want to impose some belt-tightening measures because they want their money back over a period of time. And this will certainly, in the near to medium term, impact your fellow Sri Lankans. How long, though, do you think will this crisis last, and when will it be resolved if the money is lent and the belt-tightening measures are put in place?
Well, I think it's going to take some time, Rico, because the foreign exchange reserves of the country have plunged to almost zero, and there's no money to import a lot of the food that Sri Lankans need. And they don't grow many of the foodstuffs that are staples in the country. So that is one problem. Fuel and other imports are also affected. So the lack of foreign exchange has to be, as you say, addressed by some sort of new lending. But the problem is, because of the accumulation of previous debts, the government is finding it very difficult to persuade lenders, even neighboring India, to put in fresh money.
And with all the problems being piled up right now in Sri Lanka, I mean, the state of the economy has gone from bad to worse. Can this have a contagion on emerging economies in South Asia and, for example, here in the Philippines?
Well, the contagion, if at all, would be the flight of capital from emerging markets, particularly in the Asian region. We haven't seen that as yet. I mean, there definitely has been some capital flight back to the United States over the last year. but it hasn't really picked up pace. In the case of Sri Lanka, as I said, they entered the COVID pandemic already in a weakened state. So in a sense, they are ahead of others in terms of the downswing. But we'll have to see. I mean, they're definitely with the strong US dollar and other international factors, and the problems that China is facing in terms of recurrence of the COVID infection rates. I think you could see some sort of contagion in the longer term. But right now, I don't think Sri Lanka poses any sort of contagion risk to the rest of the region.
And of course, we're not only seeing an economic crisis here, but also political turmoil. The president and the prime minister are nowhere to be found. I mean, you also need political stability to bring back money into the country and foreign tourists.
That is absolutely right, Rico. His Excellency the President is supposed to be overseas. It's not clear. The Speaker of Parliament has been making statements on his behalf. But I'm informed that the Prime Minister is back at work. He's in his office. So the government is functioning. And as I said, there are crucial talks going on regarding the economy and economic policy in general, which has to be set right fast before this economic crisis really results in starvation and unnecessary pain for the population of Sri Lanka.
Arjuna, thank you so much for your insights on the Sri Lankan economy. Former Sri Lankan Central Bank Governor Arjuna Mahenderan.